I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. The studio had always been my sanctuary, a haven nestled in the heart of the city where words flowed like a river from my fingertips. As a writer, the quietude was sacred, undisturbed except for the occasional clack of the keyboard or the sip of coffee that fueled my late-night inspirations. My wife, Elara, had the only other key, a symbol of trust in our marriage that she had, until recently, seemed to honor with the sanctity it deserved. On a crisp morning, with the autumn air biting at my cheeks, I prepared for a business trip that would take me out of town for a week. The suitcase was packed, the passport in my coat pocket, and a stack of crucial notes for my upcoming book waiting on the studio desk. But as the taxi hummed softly outside, ready to whisk me to the airport, a sinking realization stopped me dead: the notes. I cursed under my breath, urging the driver to wait, and dashed back towards the studio. The urgency of the moment made my heart race. Missing this flight was not an option, but neither was leaving without those notes. The new lock on the studio door gleamed under the morning sun, a recent replacement after the old one had mysteriously broken. A little voice in the back of my mind had whispered suspicions, but I had silenced it with denial. As I turned the corner, the sight that greeted me was as unexpected as it was cliché: a man, fumbling at the door with a key that no longer fit. Tall, with a nervous tic that made his hands shake, he didn't hear me approach. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cold, tinged with an edge that made him jump. He spun around, eyes wide, the old key dropping from his fingers. "I must have the wrong door," he stammered, but his gaze told a different story, darting anxiously from the key to my face. "Looks like my wife's old key. You wouldn't happen to know Elara, would you?" The words were a test, each one laced with an underlying challenge. His face paled, a ghost of guilt passing over his features. "Elara? No, I must be mistaken. Sorry for the trouble." But his hurried apologies and swift retreat were too late. The pieces fell into place with a clarity that seared my soul. The broken lock wasn't a random failure, it was sabotage, a secret doorway for clandestine meetings I was never meant to discover. How many times had this man stood where I stood, in the very heart of my sanctuary? The taxi horn blared, a sharp reminder of the ticking clock. With a heavy heart, I entered the studio, grabbed the notes, and locked the door behind me. The flight and the business trip would go on, but something fundamental had shifted. As the city skyline faded into the distance, a plan began to form. The betrayal was clear, and so was the path forward. Revenge would be meticulous, decisive. Elara's deception would be met with the full wrath of a husband scorned. The journey had just begun, and as the plane ascended, so did my resolve. Elara and her lover had played their part, but the final act would be mine alone. The plane's wheels touched down on the tarmac with a jolt that echoed my turbulent thoughts. The city I'd landed in was unfamiliar, a sprawling canvas of lights and shadows, but my mind was back in my studio, replaying the morning's confrontation. The business meetings that awaited me felt like distant echoes against the clamor of betrayal. Sleep eluded me that night, the hotel room a poor substitute for the solitude of my studio. By the light of dawn, I had made a decision. If my sanctuary had been violated, I would not sit idle. Today, I would begin the unraveling of Elara's secrets. I started with a call to a locksmith, a specialist known for his discretion and expertise. "I need to know how often the lock was tampered with," I told him firmly over the phone. The locksmith agreed to examine the lock and promised a report by the time I returned home. Next, I contacted a private investigator. "I suspect my wife of infidelity," I confessed, the words bitter on my tongue. "I need evidence, and I need her lover's identity confirmed." "Understood," the PI responded, his voice a low, businesslike rumble. "I'll start with surveillance and gather what you need." Armed with the beginnings of a plan, I attended my meetings, my facade of normalcy unbroken. Yet beneath the surface, the seeds of retribution were sprouting. Each handshake and every polite nod were underlined by the thrill of the impending storm I was orchestrating. The return trip was a blur, my mind preoccupied with the steps that lay ahead. Upon landing, the first message that greeted me was from the locksmith. His findings were succinct: the lock had been tampered with multiple times over the past 6 months. A cold fury settled in my chest. Driving home, I stopped by the studio first. It stood silent, waiting, the shadows within seeming to whisper of the deceit it had concealed. The locksmith's report lay on my desk, a detailed account of unauthorized entries that matched times Alara had told me she was visiting her sister. I sat in the dim light of my studio, the evidence laid bare before me. It was more than just a breach of trust, it was a calculated affront to our marriage. As I pondered my next move, my phone vibrated with a new email. The private investigator had sent the initial surveillance photos. The images on my screen were a visual confirmation of the betrayal. There was Alara, laughing outside a cafe, her arm linked with the man from the studio. His identity was now known, a local real estate agent named Damon, who evidently enjoyed the stolen moments as much as the sanctuary he had violated. With each piece of evidence, my resolve hardened. Alara and Damon's deceit had been thorough, but my response would be surgical. As night fell over my city, the contours of my plan sharpened. I would confront Alara, but on my terms, at a time of my choosing. When the moment came, it would not just be a confrontation, it would be the closing of a chapter. The stage was set, the players unknowing pawns in the final act of a drama they had scripted through their infidelity. The next moves would be mine, each more calculated than the last. The day of reckoning was draped in a typical overcast, the sun an absent guest, as if the skies themselves mirrored the storm brewing within me. I had spent the night rehearsing every word, each phrase weighted with the gravity of betrayal. The morning found me at my studio, a place once filled with creative solitude, now the stage for a confrontation that would end one chapter of my life and begin another. Before Alara's expected return from her yoga class, I arranged the evidence on my desk: the locksmith's report, the photos from the investigator, and a copy of our bank statements revealing unexplained withdrawals. Each item was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. As the clock ticked closer to the hour, my heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination. The sound of the key turning in the lock signaled her arrival. Alara stepped in, her face relaxed, unaware of the storm she was about to enter. "Welcome back," I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil inside. Alara smiled, placing her yoga mat by the door. "Thank you, darling. Did you miss me?" Her casual demeanor stung, her words laced with an irony she didn't realize. "More than you know," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Please, sit. We need to talk." A flicker of concern crossed her face as she noticed the documents laid out. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and wariness. "This," I began, my fingers brushing over the photos, "is the truth about your affairs, Alara. The locksmith's report shows multiple tamperings with the studio lock, and these," I pointed to the photos, "show you with Damon. Care to explain?" Alara's face drained of color. For a moment, she said nothing, her eyes darting towards the door as if contemplating escape. Then, she sank into the chair, her posture deflated. I don't know what to say." "Start with the truth," I insisted, my tone steady. The confession, when it came, was a cascade of excuses and apologies. "It just happened," Alara whispered. "I was lonely, you were always busy, and Damon, he was there. It was a mistake. A mistake repeated many times, in our own studio." My voice rose, the anger no longer contained. "You desecrated our sacred space, Alara. How many times did he come here?" Alara sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry, I never meant to hurt you. I thought it didn't matter as long as you didn't know." "But I do know, Alara. And it matters," I replied sharply. I want a divorce. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be served papers by the end of the week. The finality of my words hung heavy in the air. Elara stood abruptly, her face a mask of shock and sorrow. Is there no chance for us? Can't we try to? No, I cut her off, the decision clear and irrevocable. It's over, Elara. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. As she left the studio, her departure marked the end of our shared life. The door closed with a soft click, but it resonated like a gunshot in the silence of the room. I was alone, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage built on trust and toppled by deceit. The confrontation had been as painful as it was necessary. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in months, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The betrayal was out in the open, and with it, the chance to rebuild my life on my terms. In the aftermath of our fractured parting, the studio became a fortress of solitude once again, but with a different essence. An air of cold determination had replaced the warmth of creative passion. The plans I had meticulously laid out were coming to fruition, and with each passing day, my resolve to end this chapter with unequivocal finality grew stronger. The first part of my retribution had been clinical, dispassionate. I had ensured that Elara's financial stability was undermined by freezing our joint accounts, based on the proof of her infidelity which violated our prenuptial agreement. She was left floundering, desperate and unprepared for a life of financial independence. I spent the next few weeks immersed in the second phase of my plan, which was more intricate and required a delicate touch. Damon, her lover, was a successful real estate agent, his reputation his most valuable asset. An anonymous tip to a well-known local blogger, combined with carefully leaked suggestive emails and photos, began to tarnish his public image. Rumors swirled, deals faltered, and Damon's career started to crumble under the weight of scandal. The crescendo of my revenge required a personal touch. I invited both Elara and Damon to meet me at a prestigious art gallery under the guise of discussing a settlement that could potentially salvage Damon's career. They arrived together, wary but hopeful, clinging to each other amidst their shared downfall. As you both know, I began, my voice echoing slightly in the expansive room, your actions have consequences. Damon, your career is in shambles. Elara, you've lost the life you knew. But I offer you a chance for redemption. Their eyes lit up with a flicker of hope, which made what came next even more satisfying. This gallery, I continued, gesturing around at the exquisite artwork, is hosting a special exhibit next week. Hidden cameras have captured every deceitful moment you shared in my studio. The exhibit's centerpiece will be a video installation showcasing your affair, titled Betrayal in Motion. It will be marketed as a groundbreaking blend of personal narrative and art. The color drained from their faces as the gravity of the situation settled in. Elara reached out, touching my arm in a plea. Please, don't do this. We'll disappear. You'll never hear from us again. I stepped back, shrugging off her touch. The show will go on. Consider this my final gift to you both, a chance to be stars in your own tragic play. Security arrived to escort them out. They left, not with the rage I had anticipated, but with a defeated realization that their lives as they knew them were over. They had betrayed not just me but each other, relying on a deceit that could never last. As I watched them leave, a mixture of relief and emptiness swept through me. The revenge was complete, ruthless, and public. Yet, the victory was bittersweet. The love I had once felt was replaced by a hollow triumph. The gallery around me felt colder now, the art pieces mere spectators to my calculated retribution. I turned to leave, the echo of my footsteps a stark reminder of the solitude I had chosen. The game of deception was over, the pawns removed from the board. Ahead lay a path of rebuilding and reflection, perhaps one day leading to forgiveness, not for them, but for myself, for being blinded by love, and for allowing vengeance to become my muse.